Hey guys, I'm Justin, creator of Atari.io, serious retro gamer since 1993, VR innovator, all-round retro enthusiast, and DeLorean owner since the 1990s. And I'm doing the commentary for Blue Lightning for the Atari Lynx. Blue Lightning was programmed at Epix by Stephen Landrum in 1989. Stephen had done work on the Starpath Supercharger for the Atari 2600 and had programmed games like Frogger and Communist Mutants from Space. The way they're able to do that Frogger is because it was on cassette tape, and Parker Brothers didn't own the rights to a cassette format. They only owned it for the cartridge format. Blue Lightning is a one-player game. It was one of the very first games available on the Atari Lynx. I wouldn't call it a killer app, but it was certainly probably one of the top 5 games for the Atari Lynx. It was really fantastic for its day. Atari even had Blue Lightning demo cards that were demonstration cartridges that were put into Lynx demo units at Toys R Us and other game stores that had the Lynx on display. And it had an exclusive demo version of Blue Lightning. Some of those demo cards turn up on eBay. They've become pretty collectible, but they're not all that difficult to find. So if you're a Lynx aficionado and you enjoy Blue Lightning, I'm sure if you look hard enough, you'll be able to find one at a reasonable price out there somewhere. And if not, just contact me. I have a few. I'm sure I'd be willing to trade. Even though the Lynx only has around 100 titles for it, a pretty high percentage of those games are just simply fantastic. When you compare it to a lot of the shovelware that came out for the Game Boy, the Lynx was a very mature system and had some fantastic games on it. Although none of them really hit killer app status like Mario or Sonic. That was possibly due to Atari's lack of a meaningful mascot. If you look at Blue Lightning, there's a tremendous amount of depth in this game in terms of the playfield. Most air combat simulators of the time would allow you to go up and down and left and right, but it was all constrained, like you were flying through a tube. Like you'd point the nose into the side of the TV screen and it wouldn't really, it hit a point where it wouldn't go any further. And technically that's the same with Blue Lightning, but I mean, you can look how high I'm climbing here. You can really climb very high, and it takes a while to go back down to ground level. And even though I don't think you can't really fly in circles if you fly off to the right or to the left, the game never stops you. It never prevents you from, you never hit the edge of the screen. Does take you a little while to come back down here to ground level. And that really does add something to the game, that you can fly just above the ground, and you can fly through the clouds and above the clouds, and that there's you can reach the stratosphere in this game. There's something very freeing about that, and given the time that this game was released, that's pretty unique. It's clear in this game that the Lynx has two 16-bit processors. If you go back and play early Game Boy games from the same period, the difference is just profound. As we fly through these little mountains here, and not just through them, but as you move up and down in terms of altitude, it's very clear that there's a lot of processing going on, and I think the Lynx deserves a lot of credit for that. It's really amazing to think that I was playing this game at the same time the Genesis was first being released in the US. I'm watching this on a 70-inch screen as we record this commentary, and even on such a large screen, the Lynx still looks pretty good. The Lynx had a proprietary screen that was pretty unique, and that has to do somewhat with why Lynx games appear kind of pixelated in emulation. But even so, I think this looks really great for the time. We were just playing TurboGrafx 16 right before we started this commentary, and now that I'm kind of able to compare the two side by side, even though it's kind of pixely, the Lynx just looks great. It's really clear that there's a lot of horsepower going on here, and a lot more than what was in the TurboGrafx. I don't know what it is, but something about Blue Lightning reminds me of Eddie Winslow from Family Matters. I don't know if there was an episode where Eddie Winslow was playing Blue Lightning, but I don't know why. Whenever someone mentions Blue Lightning, the first thing I think of is the demo card that I got from Toys R Us, and then the second thought I have is Eddie Winslow playing Blue Lightning. Kind of weird. If you're not careful, these bombs can really get you. In my experience, it's much easier to shoot down enemy fighters than the bombs being launched at you. There's really a tremendous amount of action that goes on in this game. That just adds to the horsepower of this game, that there's so much going on the screen at one time. It adds a real challenge in terms of gameplay. I really love this landing sequence coming up here. The little men that run out to refuel your jet. The animation on that is just so perfect, even though they're pixely and monochrome. Just the way they jog out to the jet and they have that spring in their step. It's just perfect. And the perspective is really good in this game as well. The way they have the composition of the aircraft, which, by the way, in case it's not excruciatingly obvious, is supposed to be an airplane from the Blue Angels. It's the inspiration behind the game. But again, the composition of the screen, how as the jet points up and down, its position on the screen itself from the player's perspective changes. As it points down, it levels towards the middle, and as it goes up, it points. As it goes up, it moves towards the bottom of the screen, and as it points down, it moves towards the top. And there's something about all of that adds a lot more, a lot more depth to the perspective. And even just as you move up through the clouds here, there's just so much going on. There's so many layers to what's going on. There's tanks firing at you from the ground, there's bombs coming from the sky, there's fighters coming from behind you, coming from in front of you. It's really quite remarkable, given that this was from 1989. I mean, gosh, I barely had an NES at this point. I can only imagine what it must have been like at Atari to go from relaunching the 7886, which was supposed to have been out in 84, and all through 87 and 88 having games like Centipede and Dig Dug and arcade classics that are really brilliant games, but 2 years later to have this in the palm of your hand that's such a profound advancement. I know this kind of sounds like a naive thing to say, but honestly, I really wish Atari would have released a consoleized version of the Lynx. They were working on the Panther, which was supposed to be their 16-bit system, which was going to be very advanced. And they hit a point in the fall of 91 where they just decided to go ahead and leapfrog towards the Jaguar and go for a 64-bit system. But in the process, they missed out on the whole 16-bit generation. And there was a lot of heavy competition. The Super Nintendo, the Genesis, TurboGrafx 16, and the Turbo Duo. Not to mention other things on the horizon like CDI and 3DO, but in hindsight, again, just looking at this on a large screen, compared to the TurboGrafx, even though it's a little pixely, it seems like they could have released even like an adapter or something for the Lynx to be able to play this on the television set, and maybe maybe soften the pixels a bit and add a smoother font. I can see why they wouldn't want pixelated graphics, but this is really it's quite remarkable. And again, even pixelated as it may seem compared to a lot of games on the NES at the time, which was the de facto console of the day, this is really powerful stuff. There's just so much action going on at one time, and I think that the Lynx is just such an underrated system, and games like this really go to prove that. Gosh, I love how it's just floating off the ground here. These clouds look really substantial. They kind of remind me of the clouds in Warbirds. Warbirds had a similar effect with the clouds, where they seemed like something that you could fly right up to, and through a lot of games of that time didn't allow that. There were clouds, but you never really felt like you could fly into them, or that they were right there, that you could touch them. I think that adds a lot of realism to the game. Alright guys, well, we're out of time for this video, but we'll be back another time, I'm sure. I'm sure I will see you guys again soon.
Check out atari.io for the very best in retro life and classic gaming. From Atari to Nintendo, Sega, TurboGrafx, and beyond. atari.io